Hey guys, and welcome to the Vally of Shadows Paranormal Podcast. I am your host Matt, and today we got a special one for you. We have stories coming out of the book Stories That Must Not Die. This was published back in 1975. It has all the good stuff in it, scary stories, folklore. I've been dying to get my hands on this book to read these stories to you guys. If you hear some kind of water dripping in the background, I apologize. That is my new fish tank. I did not think about it, and I placed it next to my workstation, so I'm guessing I'm gonna have to move it so you won't have this problem anymore. Sorry if running water makes you have to go pee-pee. Maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Anyways, let's get into this book. The first story is gonna be called Dancing with a Ghost. The old folks tell this story as if it were the gospel truth. After so many generations, so many storytellers, myth and facts become all entangled. One Saturday evening, Manuel left his home to go to a dance. Halfway to Benavides, he spotted a girl standing by the road. Although he didn't know the girl, he stopped and asked if he could do something for her. She answered she wanted to go to a dance and needed a ride. Manuel told her he was on his way to a fiesta, and she was more than welcome to come along with him. She accepted gladly and climbed into his pickup. Manuel was very happy over his unexpected date. She was very pretty, although the old-fashioned dress she was wearing did not do her justice. Her name was Maria, and she had told him she was not known around because she had been away for 10 years. They had a great time at the dance. She did not do too well with the new rhythms like the cumbia, but she was one of the best polka dancers they had ever seen. After midnight, the musicians stopped playing. Maria sighed, like she wanted them to never stop. The couples left one by one. The night was cold, and Manuel and Maria walked back to the pickup. He put his coat over her shoulders. She has to be left at the exact spot where she had been picked up. As Manuel did not see any lights anywhere around, he wanted to accompany her, thinking she would have a long walk in the dark. She thanked him for a wonderful evening, but insisted in her being left alone. He begged her to keep his coat and promised to come back in the morning for it. Manuel was very anxious to see Maria again. He drove back to the same spot and saw a little white house about a quarter of a mile away. He took the little dirt road and stopped in front of the porch. A lady opened the screen door, and Manuel asked if he could see Maria. The lady turned pale and finally said, "Maria, Maria, my dear Maria, died 10 years ago. But Senora, this is impossible. I took her to the dance last night. We had a good time. She is a great dancer. She was wearing a pink dress." The lady was in tears. "My daughter was buried in a pretty pink dress, and she was a very good dancer, especially when they played polkas and corridos. But I'm telling you, she died in an accident 10 years ago." Manuel insisted. "I even loaned her my coat, and I told her I'll be back for it today." "Come with me, young man," answered the lady. "I know what will convince you. Our family cemetery is over by the road. You will see where Maria is buried." They walked in silence to the cemetery. It was true. There was a stone with the inscription Maria Lozano, 1920 through 1940, R.I.P. And upon the grave, Manuel's coat. Manuel had danced the whole evening with a pretty ghost. Well, that's a classic one right there. I've heard this one a few times growing up. I think there was even a movie about it on Disney Channel. I mean, the only reason I remember that's because the girl who played the ghost was the Pink Ranger, and every kid knew who the hell Pink Ranger was. She was a pretty girl herself. Anyway, let's get into another story here. This one is called The Handsome Stranger. Dolores was a very beautiful girl, and she knew it. She was vain, proud, and cruel. She found a special pleasure in building the boys' hopes and then dropping them without a warning. With her big green eyes, she could melt them at will, and the next moment freeze them with her spite. Her mother cautioned her often to not play with men's feelings, but she just laughed it off, and continued with her games. The black and white ball was coming soon, and Dolores was looking forward to it. She knew it would be another triumph for her. The good-looking boys would form a line waiting to have a dance with her. She could already see the other girls turning green with envy. Her mother had strong misgivings about the dance. She couldn't help think that something was going to happen to her daughter. She even cried and begged Dolores not to go. Dolores answered briskly that if she were to listen to her mother's apprehensions, she would have to stay home all the time. Unable to change her daughter's mind, the mother decided to at least accompany her that night. When Dolores made her entrance into the American Legion Hall, she was so stunning that all the conversation stopped suddenly and the musicians missed a beat. Everything went well during the evening. Dolores' mother felt somewhat ailey about all these worries for nothing. At 11:45, the doors of the ball opened and a handsome stranger walked in. He stopped for a moment and looked all around. There was not a girl there who did not wish to be chosen by him for the next dance. He walked across the floor towards Dolores, bowed gently, and asked her for the last dance. She was blushing with pride. One more tribute to her beauty. Her mother felt chills up and down her spine. "Please, let's go home now," she begged Dolores. Dolores did not even hear. Intense as she was enjoying her victory over the other girls, the musicians played a corrido, and the stranger proved himself to be an extraordinary dancer. They were pirouetting, gliding, and spinning. The corrido was over, and the stranger continued to dance. They turned faster and faster. She shouted, "Enough! Stop! There's no more music!" But faster they spin. Dolores cried, and the stranger laughed louder and louder. At midnight, a dense smoke surrounded the dancers. A smell of sulfur filled the hall. When the cloud disappeared, the stranger had vanished. There was only Dolores on the dance floor, dead. There was no doubt in anybody's mind. It was Satan himself who had danced with Dolores. There's another great story for you, another legend from the area. I mean, this story has so many versions that have like way more details. This one seems pretty cool. But in the other stories I've heard, Dolores looks down and she noticed that the guy has like one donkey foot and one like chicken foot, where people could see that he was transforming into the devil himself mid-dancing and all this stuff, and that they were like flying in the air and all this whatnot. I mean, I don't know. I even ran into a guy at work one time at a job I had previously, where he said his sister was there and they saw everything go down. I mean, it sounded pretty cool, but I mean, was he telling the truth? I don't know. But it made a really great story and it sure helped pass the time. Alright, let's get into another story here. This next one is called The Lady in Black. For many years now, I've heard rumors to the fact that the lady in a black dress appears at the crossing of Highway 141 and 281. Between Paramount and Ben Bolt. I know it's easy to disregard the whole thing with a shrug and say, just another ghost story. But what are you going to do when groups of people come to you and describe the lady they have actually seen? Among these witnesses, there are 4 men who recently were going to work at an Exxon refinery. It was at the middle of the night. All of a sudden, there was a lady right in front of them, right in front of their car. They couldn't possibly avoid hitting her. There was a thud, no bump, but the passengers of the car were sure that the lady had been killed. They got out and looked around, but found nothing. They called the sheriff. With their headlights and spotlights, they searched all around looking for the lady, looking for the body. The lady in black was nowhere to be found. Intrigued by the statement of the actual witnesses, I started to look for the identity of the phantom in black. Who could she be? Why was she appearing in these areas? I went around the neighboring ranches, talked to the old folks, and asked about the apparition. I have found the answer. Thanks to a nice old man who lives in the back of Gastolino. His eyes sparkled when I asked him about the lady in black. Sure, I know who she is, he said with conviction. Her name is Don Lenora Rodriguez de Ramos. I will repeat the story exactly the way he told it to me. This goes back to the days when the Rio Grande Valley was still old Spanish province of Nuevo Santander. A rich landowner, Raul Ramos, married one of the prettiest girls in Mexico, which was Lenora Rodriguez. The marriage celebrations were still going on when Don Raul received a letter asking him to go back to Spain immediately in order to take care of urgent business. Unwilling to expose his young bride to the perils of a long sea voyage, he left his new bride at the ranch house. He was gone 6 months. He was very happy upon his return that his wife was 6 months pregnant. His joy was short-lived though, because a jealous neighbor came to tell him Dona Lenora had been unfaithful and that the child she was carrying was illegitimate. Don Raul, who was a very violent man, went into an uncontrollable rage. He called 2 of his most trusted ranch hands and told them that the next morning they were to take Donna Renora in the carriage. His orders were very clear, that they were to ride for 24 hours and then they were to hang her. The ranch hands left with the young bride at the crack of dawn. Don Raul left on horseback at the same time. He headed south. By so doing, he knew that if he were to weaken and change his mind, he would be too far to do anything about it. The men obeyed orders. After 24 hours, they reached approximately where the 2 highways cross now. In spite of her pleas, they hanged the poor lady. At that exact moment, 24 hours after riding south, Don Raul shot himself in the head. Then I asked my old friend, "Why do you think she keeps coming back?" "It's very simple," he replied. "It's to justify herself. It is to prove that she hadn't been unfaithful, that the baby that she was carrying was really her husband." And he added, with a bit of malice in the corner of his eye, "Write a story about her in the paper. Who knows? She might feel vindicated and finally rest in peace." Well, that was a pretty good story. I've never heard of the lady in black. Like in our previous stories, there's always a lady in white. So this is the first time for me hearing this one. It's pretty interesting. Kind of around the same idea though, you know. A woman, her husband, there's something that goes on between them, and then she dies, and then he dies. Or I mean, something like that. Kids involved, a baby. Yeah, well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is 3 stories from the book of Stories That Must Not Die. I'm looking forward to reading more of these. Apparently there's 4 volumes, so there will definitely be more stories to be had. But thank you guys. This is the end of the video for me. I gotta go, got stuff to do, people to see, blah blah blah. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing to the Valley of Shadows Paranormal Podcast. Try to get some more videos out for you guys, and see you later.